And welcome back. Welcome back again, yours truly. Welcome back again, yours truly, Anthony Parker of Keeping It Honest. You have any questions or comments? You can text me. Telephone number is 216 702 3718, 216 702 3718. And also like and share and friend me. Connect with me. Let me know how you feel about our show because we are there for you. What's the show about, you say? Keeping it honest. Well, we have so many titles on the show. It was Keep It Real, which technically it still is. But because of somebody else having that name, we decided to call it Keep It Honest. But no matter what, we keep it honest, we keep it simple, and we keep it real. So on this program, what we try to do is we try to put things in a Parker twist. My name again is Anthony Parker Alexander, and we talk about stories that people don't talk about. We talked about the almost 30 missing kids in Cleveland, Ohio. We did an interesting story about Jim Brown and his legacy. That's also on our podcast. We've discussed why do people do what they do. We talked about the presidential election coming up in about 16 months. We're going to do stories on that. We talked about the Trump indictment, talked about the Biden situation. Should he still be president? And if you missed some of those, just get online and type in Keep It Honest, and you'll be able to get portions of that show or that show in its entirety. But tell your friends there's nowhere else to go to keep it real and keep it honest. So today, I decided every year is Father's Day, but then every day is really Father's Day. We don't tend to give a salute to fathers like we should. Me being a single dad and me talking to dads, I get it. A lot of people don't respect the dads out here, the fathers. But being a father, sometimes you think that dad fixes everything. And it's interesting because when kids get older, they think, okay, well, you know what? We don't need dad to fix that. And sometimes we have to realize that. But the dads and the fathers mean the same thing. As we're going to talk about today. A little lighthearted, but then we're going to give facts and figures because if you watch the show, you know pretty much that is what I do. So on this program, we're going to talk about, if you look at all the dads, the TV dads, which one do you think you are? When you were a kid growing up and you watched TV, you looked at the media, which one of these dads did you say, wow, that's like my dad, or that's farthest from my dad, or that's the dad that I want my dad to be, or that's the dad that I want to be? So we're taking a lighthearted but yet serious approach on dads. We're trying to give respect to dads. So we're going to give some statistics too about dads. Some people may like, some people may not. We're going to talk about single dads, divorced dads, family dads, and gay dads, and maybe some more mixed in. How many dads are there in the United States? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the presidential dads. Some again you may like, some you may not like. So let's give a statistic first. Dad fixes everything. All right, so how many dads do you think there are across the world? So here we go. There are 72.2 million fathers in the United States. And this is as the latest US Census. 72.2 million fathers. Some of the states put the total number of fathers in the world, 1.5 billion fathers out there. 1.5 billion fathers. That's a lot of dads. The interesting thing is, how many of those dads have how many children? How many of those dads have children from one person or children from a lot of people? But overall, there are 1.5 billion fathers out there. Do dads fix everything? Well, if you're a TV dad, you kind of try to fix everything. We don't know if that always happens, but you know, when you look at some of the shows been on TV for a couple of years, I'm going to tell you about some of the ones that have been some of my favorites, which might surprise you, but then these also be some of the ones that you've watched over the years. and you still watch. So what makes a good dad? Okay. I'm gonna give you a commentary, which I also do sometimes on my show. So this is a commentary. May be mine, may not be mine. I know you see all of this out here. A lot of stuff, a lot of research. So we thank you for helping us out. We thank you for supporting us. But we do a lot of work, even with the show, the fun stuff. So every day should be Father's Day. So let's think about what is being a man. As I said, do fathers and dads mean the same thing? So fathers and father figures, to reflect on that, does it mean to be a man? What do they want their children and grandchildren to understand about being a man in today's world? How do they see manhood changing? How different is it to be a father today than it was to be years ago? So these have been some comments. I put it out there. What is it like being a father? What's it like being a man? These are some of the comments that I get. And this was a portion written by this one guy. To my sons and grandsons and to my male students, and he also was a teacher, you will hear a lot about strength. Some of this will be obvious and overt. Some will come through constant, powerful cultural messages. Much of this messages will be silly and trivial, and some will be actively harmful. Strength is required to be good, useful, and trustworthy. That should be our constant goal. In that regret, strength will manifest mostly inside of you. It involves aligning your actions with a high moral note. It means fighting any trait or inclination that would lead you to hurt or harm another in any way. It involves fighting any trait or inclination that would have you keep you from your fullest potential because you have to fight sometimes. Real strength involves owning your actions and choices. It means working to right your mistakes, to learn and grow. This requires constant strength. It's very hard being a dad or anybody these days, and it's an ongoing challenge, a quest for the very strongest. Strength includes building the resources to stare fear in the eye and still go through it. A truly strong man can be fully trusted by anyone in any situation, at home, at work, at a social gathering, anywhere. Work hard to be consistently genuine and caring. People can see that. In my mind, if you can earn and be worthy of it, a small child's trust, then you will be well on your way to achieving real strength because it all starts with kids. There's another term we use for the fullest, most evolved version of a strong man, a good one. These forms of strength are often not visible, trendy, or celebrated, but they will bring you peace and fulfillment. Each time you apply strength to being good, it will truly flex your muscles and the psyche and your soul that will allow your life to soar to be joyful, meaningful heights. And that's somebody's interpretation as far as being a man. You're watching. And we have so many names of our shows, so many different shows, Keeping It Honest with Anthony Parker Alexander. And we're talking about some of the greatest TV dads of all time. Got them in order right here. Which ones do you think you are? You think of, let's go with number one. We're going to start one and go down. You think of the number one dad. You look at TV, and sadly, he passed away about a year ago. And whether you're young and old, generational, you've probably seen the show with his dad, Bob Saget. And you loved him on that show that he was on. But the interesting thing about him, well, his name was Danny Tanner, and this show was Full House. He was a father figure, single dad, raised his kids, had his best friends working with him, and he was able to go through things and do the right thing and make it work. It's interesting. Off the air, though, Bob Saget had a pouty mouth, okay? But no matter even through that, people loved him. In a lot of people's eyes, he is the ultimate number one dad. When he needed help, his friends came through too. That's a father figure. That's a good man. And this is one TV dad that would always live in infamy. Bob Saget, Full House. So you think it is dad? And this is a recent dad for people that didn't see Full House. And this guy, every time you see him, the sad story was we would see him in, I guess, when people daydreamed and they went back and thought about, their dad. If you had a dad that was there for his kids, that was there very moralistic and tried to teach them the best, and his wife loved him, and his friends loved him, and every time you saw him on TV, wouldn't you cry? Jack Parson or Pearson. He's pretty much your greatest TV dad. He wasn't selfish. He loved his wife and children. And literally, his family was his world. He's also one of the few men that make men who think of their dads tear up every time they think of him. This is us, Jack Pearson. Are you that dad? If you are, that's great. One of my favorite dads, and you know this one. Can't whistle now, but you know part of that. His show was on in the 1960s. This is a single guy. His wife had died, and he raised his son. But he needed somebody to help him up. He needed, like, an aunt. And this show won for 8 years, one of the best wholesome shows ever. And it showed you, even back then in the 60s, hey, you know what? I want to be like my dad. The Andy Griffin Show. There's Andy, there's Barney, his best friend, his cousin. There's Aunt B that helped raise him. And there, of course, is Ron Howard back then, who was Opie. Everybody wanted to be like Opie. Everybody wanted to have a dad like Andy Griffin. Opie, played by Ron Howard, eventually got into Happy Days, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Excuse me. And he learned a lot from Andy Griffin. He had a great role model, and the show, the Andy Griffin Show, was one of the greatest shows in the history of television. And he is one of the greatest TV dads ever. So this dad coming up. Are you this dad? This dad recently, he kept it real. And he's been one of the most consistent dads from the 90s to part of the 2000s, then disappearing for a while. He died in the character, and they brought him back about 5 years ago. And he's the same father now that he was almost 30 years ago. Dan Connor, Roseanne. We all know what happened to Roseanne. They killed her off. But this guy right here, John Goodman, a great actor, and he has portrayed Dan Connor as that real father. The father that will tell you, hey, get off your behind and do something, stop whining. Some people's eyes, he's one of the real fathers out there. And he's the only one that came back from the dead and is doing a better job with his older kids now than he was when he was doing it with his younger kids. So is your dad kind of like that? Or are you kind of like that? But one of the greatest TV characters, Dan Connor from Roseanne. And you are watching Keeping It Honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker. And we're talking about dads. What makes a man? What makes a father? We need to salute some of these fathers out here that don't get the credit that they deserve. And it's interesting times how fathers compared to years ago are different. We're modern. Some cry more, some don't. Back in the old days, fathers were strong and we don't cry. Fathers were more into mechanical stuff. Now there may be some fathers who may not give the attention to their kids that they should. And if they don't give that attention, how do their kids become? Are you a result of your dad? And are your kids going to be a result of you? So sports. A lot of people like this show. I never really saw it, but I heard a lot about it. So almost about 10 years ago, and he made a movie first, then it was a TV show. This show, Friday Night Lights, Kyle Chandler. So this is Coach Taylor. So he was a father figure from what I gathered, both on and off the field. Not only was he there for his players, but he also was there, excuse me, for his home. The reason that we have him on here, and it's a slogan that I heard, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Let me know if you've heard about that quote. But this is a father where he was able to balance his work life and also his family life. But they say he was a great dad. So you have time, go back, Friday Night Lights, look at that show. And for, excuse me, for all of those shows that we're going to be talking about, um, you can go on YouTube or, Netflix and see about some of those shows. So another show, we're going back to the 70s. And this is a show that a lot of people liked. He was kind of the perfect dad. He was one of the few where he had been divorced. I think raised his 3 kids, met somebody who had 3 kids, and then they decided to get together and they became the Brady Bunch. Mike Brady. He was nominated Father of the Year after Marcia nominated him on the show. Now he was able to support a wife, 6 kids, and a maid. Pretty good back then, but he was also an architectural engineer. So if you take him out the loop of raising those kids, how many people know that song? Where would that family be without Mike Brady? The Brady Bunch. He sat, talked with his kids. He gave his kids the wholesome lesson whenever they did bad. And he was there for them. And he let his kids go through things. And then he sat and he talked to the kids. And like I said, gave them a lesson. Kind of like a show I'm going to be talking about later on. But Mike Brady, the Brady Bunch. Here's another show. We're going way back in the 1970s. And this was a show. It came from a show called Love American Style, if I heard that right. And it was about a show every week, Love American Style, that was about relationships. So on this series, they featured, I guess, a couple who were in love and they were raising their kids. And the producer said, hey, you know what? We like this show so much, this episode. Let's make it into a series. And out of that series became Laverne and Shirley, Joni Loves Chachi, and Mork and Mindy. So what was the show that started it all? Hey, if we know what hey is, it's Happy Days. And on this show, we had, again, Ron Howard, after he left the Andy Griffin Show. And then we have Fonz, the Fonz, I mean, with us right here, who became, a national entertainer. A was the word. People like that. And this was a show with Mr. C, the dad, and he raises 2 sons because the first year, besides Ron Howard on there, or Richie Cunningham, he had a brother. And something happened, so they decided to scrap the other brother. But the Fonz came in, and he became part of the family. He lived in a garage and everything. And then Ron Howard, Richie, had his 2 friends there for him. And they were able to raise a family. It was a great family show. Happy Days. Great family show. That came on in the 70s. So if you need to look it up, look it up. Sometimes my camera pans in and out. It has a mind of its own, but we include that as part of our family. So I'm going to read because I'm going back and through. Comments again about being a father. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? Is a man a father? I don't know. There, I said it. Being a man who doesn't know how isn't the norm. How am I to manage if I don't know everything? Have all the answers. What if my son asks a deep question? You ever had that? Surely I ought to have some winning fatherly impact to tell them. But I'm a fatherless figure. I was raised by a single mom with 6 kids. There are things I don't know about being a man. I may be. Also, I'm a gay man raising what seems to be a straight young man. Am I qualified? Yes. But I don't know everything about being a straight young man. I'm oddly at peace with not knowing, though. My son is maturing as planned. All is seemingly well. But there will always be things I don't know. And I shouldn't pretend to know them. I'm still a dad. That I do know. So that's interesting. And how many of you are out there where you really don't know what being a father is? There's no handbook of being a father, as I can tell you. And I was a single dad raising 3 kids. Times are weird now. Times are different now. Things have evolved. Things that were one way years ago are not. The term gay is literally different back in the old days, whatever old days is. Hey, man, I like that shirt. That's gay. Now you say it. Back then, gay was cool. meaning the word. Now it has different connotations. So do we respect words now that we respected years ago? Well, with people coming after everybody for certain things, you just gotta have to be careful what you say. Speaking of what you say, here's a person back in the 1970s who was a bigot. He didn't like black people. He didn't like Jews. He didn't like nobody. But was he a good dad and he loved his family? He loved all in the family. Carol Connor, Gene Stapleton, Rob Reiner, Sally Struthers. This came on, I think, in early 1970s. It lasted 8 years. It told about different topics growing up. They kept it real. The person, Norman Lear, who created this show, also created Good Times, The Jeffersons, Maude, Sanford and Son, bunch of other cultural shows back in the 70s. And this show, Archie Bunker right there, didn't like anybody. He kind of told it. He was a guy that was like maybe some people out there back then, or not maybe, as I keep it honest. He was like a lot of people out there who didn't like anything unless it worked for him. He showed you, we learned. Did we like him? Some did, some didn't, but overall, he respected his family and he loved his family. Controversial topics back then in the 1970s was again gays, blacks, Jews, discrimination of women, rape. One of the best shows was when his wife got raped, and it was a very emotional show back in the 1970s. Back then, early days of television, they talked about topics where today they talk about anything. Back then, they were the first to talk about it. He also created Sanford and Son too, Norman Lear, and he's 100. So he left the show, Carol Connor, and then went to a show called Heat of the Night, where he played a sheriff for about 6 years. But All in the Family, one of the first breakthrough television series ever that had the hardcore stance of a father figure. He didn't really like Meathead, but yet he did. Meathead was his daughter's boyfriend and husband, and they wound to respect each other. So this show was one of the most popular shows back then in the 70s. So people were watching it, and people were learning. And even though you may not like it today, back then, it was one of the number one shows in television, All in the Family. Speaking of shows, let's go back. Maybe about 20 years ago, Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy, Married with Children. He was a guy he was a drinking guy. Let me pull this right here. He was a guy that took up for his family, always talked bad about his wife. And if you would air it today, if it's on TV today, he was very disrespectful to his wife. But that was the way that he, I guess, showed affection, which is crazy. His wife was Peg, his two kids, Kelly and Bud. And the one thing he did like about his family, he could talk about his family. But if anybody else talked about his family, then he would, of course, say something. He took up for his family. He really loved them. Show was on for almost 10 years, and you got to get used to some of the humor. It was kind of graphic, kind of in your face, but it was for that particular crowd. It wasn't for your crowd that watches a Cosby Show. It was on around the time of Cosby, and they wanted to call the show not the Cosby Show because it wasn't. It had its own different demographics. But if you fit that demographics, this was a popular show. Al Bundy, Married with Children. So you want to know, are you one of those dads? Did you have a dad like that? Did you have a dad like Archie Bunker, Al Bundy, those kind of dads, those kind of brash kind of dads? Are there dads out there today? Are there TV shows out there today that would talk about the same thing? You had a father like that? Or you are the father? Or which one do you want to be? Let me know. So we're talking about now, here's some more statistics. So more and more dads are staying at home with their kids, some by choice, which is good, others by necessity. But it's a seriously growing trend that deserves attention. So you stay at home dad, some people look at that as, oh my God, that's bad. Well, maybe some parents, because of COVID are staying at home. So here's the numbers. There are about 2.4 million stay-at-home dads, or around 6% of American dads are stay-at-home dads. So think about that. Only 6% of American dads are stay-at-home dads. Now, 24% of those dads have chosen to be stay-at-home dads. 24%. And they're not staying home because unemployment. They're staying home because they want to be at home. So I'm gonna give you another, as we go back and forth, letters talking about stay-at-home dads. As a stay-at-home dad for the past 14 years, I've learned that no one gets to decide what my masculinity means. So he's doing it on his own accord. That's for me to decide. And every time my teen daughter comes home from school and she wants to talk about her day with me, I know exactly what my masculinity means to me. It means being there for my family every day. It's this example that I want all three of my children to see as they make it through their teen years. It has taken me a long time to learn that as an at home dad, I often get comments about what real men do. I can build your deck and have your lemon tart made. Neither one has anything to do with my masculinity. How I care for my children does. And that's what being a dad is all about. So, again, on this show, we're talking about dads. We're saluting dads. What does a dad mean to you? And what TV dad are you? And what TV dad have you been raised by? Not a hard show, but it's a salute. Father, taking care of their family, being there for their family. One of my favorite shows growing up. Now we get into that was kind of political field, but we're going to talk a little bit more. And he became a famous actor. His family ties. The Keatons. You got Alex B. Keaton, which was Michael J. Fox, and you've got his family. And so the mom and dad, they were kind of raised as hippies in the 70s. And so they got married, had kids, and you have this guy right here, Alex B. Keaton. He's a staunch Republican. Back then he was. This is played by Michael J. Fox. So he would fit good in today. No matter how the Republican base is or Democrat base, he would be a hardcore Republican. He was popular. Michael J. Fox got into movies, Back to the Future 1, 2, 3, and did a lot of other stuff now. He's going through a disease and everything, and you feel for him. But one of the greatest actors out there, and as a teen, one of my favorite teen actors. And this show, really, no matter what, they were cool parents, mom and dad, and they were able to talk to their sons and daughters about issues. They didn't chastise them too much, but they had good communication. Were you raised in this kind of family? Do you have a father like that? Did you want a father like that? Let me know. You can text me 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. Hit the like and the share button and let people know what we do here on Keeping It Real. So now we were talking about some of the good dads. If you're a dad and a mafia dad, a murderer, a killer, a bank robber, you still care for your kids? Are you a good dad? So this guy right here. So his head was cut off in the one show. And before he died, he was able to teach his kids to be loyal, kind, and never give up. I won't give the spoiler alert, but look at him. Let me know who he is and get back with me. But he was a tough character, but he was good to his kids and his family. Good dad, bad person. Speaking of which, now, so we're in our good dad, bad person thing. When you're doing things, and no matter what you're doing it to help your family, does that mean you're a great family guy? Or are you Breaking Bad? Bryan Cranston, great actor. Walter White, legendary show. The spinoff Saul, Better Call Saul. Show's been on about 6 years. Even just as good. So this guy here, he started out by being a high school chemistry teacher, but he was diagnosed with lung cancer. So then he turns to what, maybe some people would, some people won't, to selling meth to keep money going for his family. He ends up destroying his family, and I'm not going to tell the end of that, but he was able to make enough money to try to take care of his family. Wow. Good father, bad father, you be the judge. But he was there. He was there. Speaking of somebody that was there, and the epitome, maybe, of a good dad, bad dad, Tony Soprano. You know him, you love him, you just couldn't get enough of him. Tony Soprano. He's cool, took care of his family, but you do not cross him or his family. Very popular show. James Gandolfino, very great actor. He put heart into the life of a mafia family. If you could have a mafia dad, wouldn't you like to have one like him? A lot of life choices may not have been good, but in the end, he was there for his family. Breaking Bad. Speaking of breaking, we're taking a break right now. Let you know you are watching Keeping It Real with yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander, and we're talking about a salute to fathers. We try to, every episode, keep it simple, keep it honest, and keep it real. That's what we do. We're talking about dad fixing everything. What's the difference between a dad and a father? We're talking about that, and we're giving shows of father figures. Some of the shows you grew up with watching, some of the shows you haven't even heard of. So you can go on Netflix and live stream some of those shows. And some of these shows are some of my favorite shows. So we're going to talk about single dads. I was a single dad too that raised my kids. 3 kids, single dad. Some people know me as a single dad that raised 3 kids. Other people know me as a guy that's done social media, podcasting, everything. So I'd like to thank all the people that supported me over the years. And you never know who's watching you. And you just pray, too, that you treat your kids and your kids treat you in the same respect that you want to be treated. As a father, and if you're a Christian, you want your father, God, whoever is your superior being, to be there for you. But you should also be there for your kids. And the thing that always scares me the most, or is challenging, I think there's karma if your kids don't respect you, and the Bible says respect your parents. So again, if your kids don't respect you, there will be karma. And hopefully I'm saying this to scare all the kids that aren't respecting your parents, no matter whether you're an older parent or a younger parent, just do the right thing. So single dads, listen to this. 2.6 million households in the United States are led by a single father. 2.6 million. Now, there are only, back in 1990, so this is this year, 2023, in the United States household, 2.6 million single dads. But compare that to 1990. Back in 1990, there were 1.2 million. So 30 years later, it has pretty much doubled. So why are there more single fathers? I guess that's a good thing, or maybe not. Artists, is it because they're widowed? Is it because they never got married? Is it because something happened to the mom? That's interesting. We'll have to talk about that in another episode. So about 52% of single fathers, as I was just talking about, 52% of single fathers are divorced, widowed, or never married. Divorced, widowed, or never married. 52%. It's almost half. 41% are living with a non-marital partner. So it is living with the partner. And only a small number of children of divorced parents suffer any long-time consequences. So only a small number suffer the consequences. Well, that part is interesting. We're going to talk about that more. Wow. Talk about dysfunctional, because I've seen dysfunctional as far as some kids being raised. Speaking of dysfunctional but loving, we're going to go light a little bit and really not real. Family Guy. I love this guy, Stewie. Who doesn't love Stewie? And then the talking dog. So, of course, this isn't real, but here's a father. He may not really take care of his family, but they're there for each other. It's a great, loving family. That's all I can say. I know people love the show because it's been on over 20 years. Speaking of over 20 something years, is The Simpsons. And if you can get beyond the fact that, they're a cartoon character that's been on for years, then it's a show about family. Who doesn't know about Bart and Marge and Homer and the baby that never ages? You like this show. Closer to a family show than most of the cartoons that are on now. Um, and it's a lovable show. You don't really have to go back to watch it because it's on right now. Speaking of on right now, which I haven't really seen, but this is recommended to me, Bob's Burger. So this guy, Bob Belcher, he's tolerant, supportive, and he's loving. Um, he's a hardworking dad, which is what we like. And he does a great job, they say, of being that modern dad. Maybe in a weird kind of way, you have to watch the show, but that's, kind of how I feel about Bob's Burger. Is he a dad that you see that could be your dad? So especially this one. I don't think this guy could be anybody's dad, especially by appearances. Now we're going into the weird section of our father's show. If you just thought those two that we did, three, the cartoons weren't. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the show. That's of like in their 20s. This is the Munsters. This is Herman Munster. And he raised his daughter right there. She's normal. And he also raised his son right there. And there's his wife. And there's his father. He's a vampire. So Herman Munster is a guy that always tries to do the right thing, like a normal family. He gets jobs. And the weird thing about this family, they don't know that they're looked at as monsters. They just think they're everyday people. So this kind of correlates with things today, with how society treats other people. They think they should be treated normal. And this world, they're not. And also in this world now, they're not. So I look at it as no matter what, if you're raising your family, you're doing everything you need to do, then treat everybody normal. And what is normal? Normal is to you what normal is to you. You don't have to have other people judge you. And that's what they do. They do their own thing. This is the Munsters. Speaking of which, the Addams family. Everybody knows the clicking of the fingers. This guy right here, John Aston Gomez, he loves his wife. That's one thing he does. He loves his wife. There's a new show on called Wednesday. Wednesday is also one of the daughter in the family. So they did a spinoff not too long ago, and they did a show just on her. Very gothic show. This show was gothic back then. It was one with the Addams family. But he was a loving father, and he tried to do the right thing for his family. And again, he was a family to them. They were normal, but to the world, they weren't. Just like people today and their families, um, we should look at normal being normal. Everybody has a different respect for normal. But, you know, like I always say, keep it honest, keep it real, keep it simple. Normal is normal. The Addams family. And you are watching again, keeping it honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker, as we talk about fathers and we give them salute. And I love this. What does it mean to be a decent human being or a father? So tradition as men is considered to be breadwinners, winners, but women are now in positions and careers that are once only occupied by men. You think of that, times have changed. Women, some of them are nurturers and educators of the young, but they desperately need to encourage those functions in men. They need to reestablish to men, hey, you know what? We're growing like you. What virtue applies to only one sex? Can you be a single dad raising your kids and be a mom and dad? And can you be a single mom raising your kids and also a mom and dad? What is the difference? Well, if you're doing what you're doing, then you should be able to give both titles. So as society changes and we wonder how much of the stuff that's happening now as far as being a single dad, was it like that years ago? Your dad may have been rough back then, and now it's okay to be, compassionate. Speaking of compassionate, here's another show back then, Growing Pains, Alan Thicke. He passed away not too long ago. So he had a home office. He worked from home, but he was there for all of his kids. This kid over here too, he became, he's a Christian now, but he became hot in the media at the same time and Michael J. Fox did. So they were competing against each other. But Michael J. Fox became very successful. He's a Christian and he stands by his beliefs. And the father, like I said, he was a stay-at-home dad. He was a psychiatrist. He raised his three kids, so you really have to love that. And he was dedicated to his wife, to a great family, great family. There's a guy back then where he went to Taxi, well, years before that. But Who's the Boss? This is a show that was on the air from 1984 to 1992. This is Tony Danza. And he was, which was interesting, the backstory of this, he was a former Major League Baseball athlete who strived to raise his daughter, Samantha, and she was portrayed by Alyssa Milano outside of his hectic baseball career. And so he decided to move and he decided to get a job as a live-in housekeeper. And he raised, which was interesting. This was interesting. He raised and took care of his daughter while he was taking care of her house. And they eventually got into a relationship and got married. And then the story went on its way. But he was a good dad, not really in depth, but he was a good single dad that just tried to raise his family in a great show. This one right here, you know him, Seinfeld, Frank Costanza. And he was George's father. One of those old school dads that really didn't give credit but loved his son. And this one, I'm not a fan of this show, but my son was fresh off the boat. It was on for like 3 years, but it told a different angle of the family. And from what I gathered, it's a great show where you can watch it. I didn't see it, but my son recommended this show. Fresh off the boat. So those were parts of my favorite dad shows, and which ones were yours? And think about this. So those were shows, we did all those numbers, and they all were non-African American shows. But how many African Americans really watch those shows? I'm curious. So now, for some of the people that, don't watch African American shows, and unfortunately, because of rules don't change it, Civil Rights Act of 65, that didn't stop people from being racist. Some people are who they are. You can be a black racist, you can be a white racist. How many of those shows said, hey, you know what? Or people said, we didn't watch those shows because it didn't appeal to us. How many people didn't watch Happy Days, who are African American? How many people didn't watch, there's so many shows. Seinfeld. How many people didn't watch Friends because it didn't appease to them? So now here's some shows. If you're not African American, I wonder if you saw them, but we're going to talk about them now. And I'm going to shows that I didn't really think were important to the ones I did think were important. Sister to Sister. Ray Campbell, this is played by Tim Reed. So this businessman, he raised his two twins. He was a single dad, but he decided to take in his one daughter, and then he took in his daughter's twin. He didn't know that she had a twin, and he took her in. And these two girls, he raised them. Nice story, good show. It was about a single dad taking care of his two daughters. And the name of the show is Sister. Good show. All right, this may surprise you, but this is one of my least favorite shows just because I didn't feel it. It was on for a couple of years. And they did talk racial issues. They talked it in a whitish way, and then they also talked it in a blackish way. Anthony Anderson. And I have told my kids, sometimes, you have hard times and you move on up like the Jeffersons. And sometimes as you're raising your kids, you kind of forget or they don't know where they were brought up from. And one thing that he tried to do was try to tell them, this is who we are, this is who we were, and this will be ourselves and our future to keep us going. He tried to talk about issues that were Black in America, kind of like maybe the Cosby Show should have did. This show, Blackish, was a show that was very popular. I don't know how popular it was in the African American community, but I know it's popular overall. And when it's popular in society, that means it's really popular. Not exactly one of my favorite shows, but I like to show my kids too, hey, let's not forget where we came from. Don't ever think you bourgeois because we had to work to even give the appearance of being bourgeois. That's what some people say. So don't do that. This is a show that was really about family, but it became a show where you wanted to see Urkel right there. Right there, Mr. Winslow. He started off in Die Hard, played the cop in the first movie, and then he got the show Family Matters, which was on for years. And it's kind of funny because Family Matters was a show about not really about raising your family, but about him and Urkel's relationship, I think, where he also raised his family. And Urkel also had a crush on a daughter, and she kept turning him down for years, but eventually they got close. And some of my favorite shows was when Urkel was nerdy and he turned cool. A great fun show, family show you can look at with no real life issues, but a great show that was lighthearted, that society loved. Family Matters. Now this show, the smart guy, the father, Floyd Henderson is his real name, but TJ was a character. So he raised his kid. His kid was very smart, college educated, but in pretty much middle school. And it was the trials and tribulations raising a smart kid and letting them know no matter what, you are still a kid. You may be smart, but you're still a kid. A great show to sit back and laugh. The Smart Guy. One of my shows, one of my personal favorites. This one it turned into a cool guy. Flex Anderson, One on One. He was a single dad and he was a bachelor. So he had to give up his bachelor days kind of to raise his daughter, Brianna. But Flex Washington was a TV announcer, also a bachelor, but also raising his daughter, trying to show her, hey, you know what? I can be cool. And I was cool at your age, but you can't be that way. So he saw the trials and tribulations of being a cool dad, trying to not have his daughter be so cool. But it was a great show that I liked watching with my kids. One on one. So this one, you know them. Moving on up to the east side, the Jeffersons, right here. There we go. She started off as on Archie Bunker, All in the Family. George Jefferson was like the African American version of All in the Family. Very popular show. Show on for about 11 years. This guy right here, Mike Evans, helped create the show. And where we at here, this lady right here is the mother, or was the mother of Lenny Kravitz. She passed away. And George Jefferson, of course, was loved by everybody. Shows on 11 years, one of my most favorite shows of all time. The Jeffersons. It's a show. Mr. Drummond, white man raises two kids, adopts them. He's a rich guy. There's a butler, and there's his daughter. Different strokes. Willis, what you talking about, Willis? He was a little mini-sized guy, small, and show was on for a bunch of years. The sad thing is, these these two people are dead. She did drugs, sadly, and he had a sordid life, getting in trouble, complications, and everything with people. And Todd Bridges has been on reality shows. I got a chance to meet her one day when they were in town for a special event, and she was a nice lady. I was a young guy, young kid, and I just happened to be somewhere where she was at. And he also came from the show Mom, very popular show, Different Strokes. And he was a dad that he would kind of let them get into their own little thing. It was social issues because they're black, being raised by a white man ahead of his time. But it was a show where they could talk social issues and have fun issues when he said, what you talking about, Willis? And it talked about the trials and tribulations of the two brothers being raised in another city, suburban city, where they used to be in a black neighborhood. Wonder what show that makes you think of. We'll talk about that. Now here's a show. No matter what, no matter how old you are, you still have a dad. Think about that. He always called his son Dummy, Sanford and Son, Red Fox, and Demond Wilson. The show was on, also a show written by Norman Lear about a father and a son who had a sample. The son had a business. He was sampled, and he was a son, and it was selling. Some people say garbage. That show was on for years, and he always talked about having a heart attack. And he was a single dad raising his son. They loved each other. The son was a great son, no matter what. He always tried to keep his dad on track. Interesting thing about him, footnote, he always talked about having a heart attack. That was a joke. But on a show that he was at on a decade later or so, he had a heart attack on his new show that he was on and died. So Sanford and Son, Red Fox, also a famous comedian. And now Demond Wilson is a pastor, been a pastor for years, as my camera keeps going in and out. Great show from the 1970s. Norman Lear, he's still alive today, and Norman Lear is 100 years old. But if you never heard of Sanford and Son, ask your parents, check it out. Speaking of father and son, here's a show. As I said, a show that will bring you to tears, like the one father we talked about. This guy, like I like this guy. He raises kids, and he was one of the, excuse me, he was one of the sons of the father, and This Is Us. So his father came around, and his father is Randall, but he was a father that hadn't been around for years. So Randall was like a lot of fathers that don't come around, never come back, but he did come back, and I give him credit for that. And he came back, and he was also dying. So in the short time that he knew his son, he did what he could to make up for lost time. So you wonder, this guy right here, you have a lot of fathers, and think about all the fathers that have run away. Now, what if they came back? And what if they were there for their kids? Would you forgive and forget if your dad came back? Would you forgive or forget? Especially if you missed a lot. That's a question. Do you have a father like that? Are you one of the fathers like that? So can you really call yourself a dad or a father if you're not around to be there for your son, no matter what age, whether you're a kid or whether you're an adult, whether that's your dad or whether you're that dad? Which dad are you? As we talk about celebration of fathering and being a dad. Here's one that people say, yeah, we like him as a dad. This guy was America's dad. Now, he's America's question mark. The Cosby Show. This show was on, man, show was on in the 80s and part 90s. Bill Cosby. He did Joe Pudding. He did another Cosby Show, a teacher show. He did I Spy back in the 60s. He was epitome of a father. He showed society and white society that Black people can have good jobs. You look at it now, how many people are not looking at him anymore? We already know the story, so I'm not going to get into it. But, have we boycotted whatever he stood for? Or do we look at what he did in the good days as far as portraying family life and letting society know, hey, we're the Huxtables and we are somebody. Speaking of somebody, one of my favorite shows, My Wife and Kids. And this was Michael Kyle. He was played by, you know him, Damon Wayans from the Wayans family. And he was one of those cool dads too, where the kids wanted to grow up and they talked issues, pregnancy, a little bit of race issues, and just being a father. And if the wife couldn't handle it, she'd say, go talk to your dad. And then if your dad couldn't handle it, he'd say, go talk to your wife, which the kids hated to do. And sometimes if the kids said, you know what, I'm not going to eat for a week, you'd say, okay, and make sure you wouldn't eat for a week. So he'd give you those weird, funny lessons. And he was the cool dad, very cool dad. That is, of course, My Wife and Kids. So here's a father that's going to be very controversial, but I had to put him on this list because I give him a lot of credit. If you watch the show Glee, and this is Mike O'Malley. So Glee was a show about dancers and singers and everything. He was a single dad, though, who was a mechanic and he loved football. And he's always, no matter what, a loving, protective father. And it was even more that way after his son Kurt comes out to him as gay. But their father-son dynamic was still one of the best in TV history. He was a hard-nosed dad. He said he dad. And when the son came out and told him he was gay, he still was that dad. No matter what you think, sexuality, whatever, he's the kind of dad, he's the kind of parent that no matter what, you don't want them jetting, you don't want them leaving, you want them to be there for you. And he was there. Mike O'Malley. One of my shows too, he kept it real. He talked about things that happen in this day and age. Bernie Mac show. He was a father. Literally, it could almost be on cable, but it was a funny show. Every episode was good. He had to deal with his I guess daughter and his two kids. Little daughter right there. He loved her. He called her baby girl. His son that he adopted was always up to something, so he's trying to teach him stuff to be a man. And his daughter was just a daughter growing up in the teens, and his wife was just in the background. But a great show. Bernie Mac dealt with today's issues and one of the funniest shows on television as far as raising a family. And sadly, Bernie Mac, passed away, but we love that show. One of my all-time favorite dads, he was number one for a lot of years. James Evan, Good Times. He was a dad that we're going to do a story about what's happening with him now, or we've done the story. You can check it out. He loved his wife. He was just a guy, had a lot of jobs, was trying to make it, take care of his family. He was a great dad. In the 1970s, he showed people, hey, you know what, it's hard out here for a dad and being a black dad, but I love my family and I'm going to make it. Good times, no matter what. Good times. John Amos, one of my favorite dads. Another one of my favorite dads, Philip Banks, Fresh Prince, James Avery. He adopted Will Smith. And you saw the dynamics, and there's a book out too talking about the behind the scenes of this show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and how it was started. And somebody helped create the show from Shaker Heights, Ohio. Interesting story about that. Look up the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and there's a book out talking about this. But as a father figure, he was very dynamic. He was stuffy, Will Smith kind of brought him down to being, hey, real, and there was dynamics between them, father and son, more than there was anyone, because Will Smith would really put Philip Bailey on point and try to get him to realize, you know what, yeah, you're black no matter what. You may think you got all that money and everything, but at the end of the day, you're as black as me, and even you can have the same problems. But you could tell that they loved each other, and it was one of the best shows out there, even though people think it was silly. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And sadly, James Avery passed away, but he was one of my favorite TV fathers, Philip Banks. Now, my number one dad. This show, this movie, Daddy's Little Girl, is about a single dad who raises three girls. And no matter what, you have to get this movie, Daddy's Little Girl, and it's Idris. This is one of his first roles where he really became famous. He wasn't really known then, but it's a great story where he raised his three kids. Gabriel Union is his attorney, and you see the pitfalls, the hard times of raising your kid and what it takes to raise a father as a single dad. One of my favorite movies, one of my favorite dad characters, in honor and tribute of fathers. What is a father? Well, you know what? You can't get any real than him in this movie, Daddy's Little Girl. And there we have it. But real quick, my top fathers. Here's some political fathers, no matter what, whether you like them or not. Donald Trump and his family, you may not like him. Okay, but he's there for his family. So can we not love him for that? Speaking of love, the Obamas. This guy had his family in the White House. He loves his family. He still loves his family. And God respect him for that. And last but not least, let's just keep it cool, keep it simple, keep it real. Joe and his son, and they love each other. Look at the glasses, they even dress like the presidential families that love each other. So you've been watching, please. Our salute to dad. And We've been talking about dads and what they make an income. You don't really have to have a lot of money, just be there for your kids. So here are some more last statistics. If a father isn't there, 33% of children live in a home without their birth father. 33%. Children without a father are more likely to show disciplinary issues. 71% of high school dropouts are from a fatherless home. 71%. 71% of pregnant teenagers come from a fatherless home. 71%. So fathers be there. And emotionally, distant fathers correlate with riskier sexual behavior in children. Wow. And let's talk about the landscape now, real quick. Gay dads. There are approximately 98,000 same-sex fathers in the United States. About 35% of same-sex fathers are formed through adoption. About 15% through a surrogate. About 39% through a heterosexual conception. About 20% of gay fathers report experiencing stigma and fear in social situations. And 1 in 5 gay fathers report their children avoid forming friendships out of fear. So society, unfortunately, is still unable to accept a lot of stuff. Here's the good things as we end this, and a good note. 47% of dads play with their kids more than their parents did. 46% of dads read with their kids more than their parents did. 54% of dads say, I love you more frequently than their parents did. How much of that is you? How much of that was your dad? How much of this do you want to be? Hopefully, the show had you think about that. And which one are you? I hope I'm all of them. I hope I've learned. I hope I become a better dad. You watch this, hopefully you will become a better dad too. So this show, we've been doing this because we respect fathers and everything they've gone through. And you know what? I could do a show about mothers, but I'm not a mother. So I don't want to disrespect. But I am a father and have raised my 3 kids. And like I said, people watch you. So you hope your kids are a better reflection than who you are. And speaking of family, 23 and Us, I'd like to thank the people that support us. 23 and Us, again, was a company and is a company formed by my family. Speaking of family, 23 and Us. We have hoodies, we have hats, we have shirts. You get online, 23andus.net. Get online, find out what you want, clothes wise. If you purchase it, when you do get it, all we want you to do is say, hey, you know what? You open up the box, you're excited. Wow, this is what I got. I got this. Yay. Just film it, you open it, and then saying, hi, my name is so and so, and I'm a part of the 23 and Us family. Wow. That's all we want. And speaking of real quick, I just happened to see Fast and Furious 10. And I'm a fan of Fast and Furious because it's all about family. I'm not going to give you the reviews, but it's a long movie. And if you want action, it's got action. So maybe check it out. You know, he's a true father figure. No matter what, he loves his family, whether he's got kids or whether he's got friends and brothers, and they're all part of family. And that's all what it's about. So we thank you again for watching this show. Tell your friends, like us, share us. Stay tuned for more episodes. We try to keep it real, keep it honest, keep it simple. And that's what we do. So, in closing, if you're a father, be the father that you're supposed to be to whoever you're raising or whoever's looking up to you. Because again, you never know who's looking. As a father, it's just one of the greatest things in the world to be. I'm Anthony Parker. You're watching Keep It Honest. We will talk again. Keep your head up, never look down, always believe in yourself, and therein will lie your answer. I'm Anthony Parker Alexander. God bless.